The battlefield had been quiet for 2 days. That was the thing no one ever prepared you for, not the noise of it, which every soldier and every surgeon expected, but the silence after. The way the meadow grasses stood up again in the morning, indifferent, as if nothing had been decided here. As if 20 years of border war had not come to a close in the mud between two ridges, signed in exhaustion rather than triumph, the armies limping apart in opposite directions. Aldrich Hahn was 59 years old, a field surgeon out of the Eastern Frontier Corps, and he had seen too many of these silences. He had learned to use them. While the officers counted their living and buried their dead, he walked the field, a slow, methodical circuit, checking for anyone his colleagues had missed. He carried a lantern and a canvas bag and the particular kind of patience that a long career in field medicine leaves behind, not hope exactly, but the refusal to assume. He found her at the far edge of the eastern slope, where the tall sedge grasses grew thick along a shallow drainage ditch. She was an orc woman, large and broad-shouldered, her leather armor split at the shoulder seam where something, a blade or a fall, had opened it. She was lying face down in the ditch, one arm outstretched as if she had been reaching for the far bank when she stopped. His lantern picked out the dark stain across her side and the slow, unmistakable movement of breath. Alive. He did not think about what side she had fought for. He did not think about rank or allegiance or whether the peace sign 2 days ago extended clearly to the wounded on the ground. He thought, she is breathing, and she needs the wound closed, and the light is failing. He got her out of the ditch himself. She was heavy, she was nearly as tall as he was and built like a woman who had trained for war since she could hold a practice blade, but he had moved large men before, and he was stronger than he looked. He dragged her to the supply tent at the edge of the field camp, laid her on the cleanest pallet he had, and lit every lamp. The wound was deep but clean, a single slash, not a puncture, which meant the important things were still intact. He worked quickly and without ceremony, cleaned it, closed it, bound it. Her breathing steadied as he worked. Her face, turned to one side on the folded blanket he had put under her head, was still. Strong jaw, heavy brow, a pair of short tusks that had a chip out of the left one. A long scar ran from her cheekbone to her jaw on the right side, old, well-healed, years before this field. Whatever she had seen in her life, it had not started here. When he finished, he sat back on his stool and looked at her for a moment. He did not know her name. He had not asked, and she had not given it. She had been unconscious when he found her and had not yet surfaced. He decided he would call her nothing until she decided what he should call her. He pulled the blanket up to her shoulder, banked the lamp down to a warm glow, and went to find something to eat. She woke on the second morning. He was writing in his field log when he heard the shift of the pallet, the particular stillness of a person who has just come fully conscious and does not yet know where they are. He had heard that stillness 1,000 times. He did not look up immediately. "You're in a field surgeon's tent," he said, in the measured tone he used for patients waking from surgery. "You're safe. The wound is closed. You've had water, I tipped it in while you were half conscious. You need more." He poured a cup from the pitcher by his kit and brought it over and held it out without theatrics. She stared at him. Her eyes were dark amber, watchful as a hawk's, and she said nothing for a long moment while she took his measure. Then she took the cup. She drank most of it before she spoke. Her voice was low and careful, carrying an accent from the northern ranges, the long vowels of the high country clans. "You're the surgeon." "I am." "Why?" It was not really a question. It was a test, the kind of flattened, stripped-down challenge that a person asks when they have been surprised by kindness and do not yet trust it. Aldrich had heard it before, too. He sat back down on his stool, out of crowding distance. "Because you were alive and in the ditch," he said. That was sufficient. She looked at him a little longer. Then she lay back and stared at the tent ceiling and said nothing more. That became the shape of the days that followed. She was not easy company. She was guarded in the way that people are when they have spent a long time being the most dangerous person in any room and have learned that the safest posture is silence. She watched everything, the way he organized his kit, the order in which he checked his patients, the small patterns of his daily routine, with an attention so thorough it might have been unnerving if Aldrich had been the sort of man to unnerve easily. He was not. He had spent 30 years practicing medicine in places where nobody wanted a surgeon until they desperately needed one, and he had learned that the best thing you could do for a suspicious patient was to be consistently, boringly predictable. He brought food at the same times. He checked the wound at the same times. He asked only what he needed to ask. How is the pain, better or the same? Can you sit up on your own now? Does this hurt when you breathe deep? She answered those questions. She did not answer others, and he did not ask them. On the fourth day she told him her name. Veth, she said, out of nowhere, while he was changing the dressing. That is what my family called me. Aldrich, he said. That is what mine called me. A pause. Then, very dry, Aldrich is a great deal to say. He almost smiled. Most people arrive at Hal eventually. She did not call him Hal that day. But he noticed she stopped watching him quite so carefully after that, the hawk's attention easing by a degree, the constant quiet readiness dialing down toward something that was not quite rest but was at least a little closer to it. On the fifth day she sat up without being asked and ate a full meal. On the sixth she was on her feet for short stretches, moving stiffly but with a steadiness that told him the wound was knitting properly. On the seventh she stood at the open tent flap in the early morning and looked out at the field for a long time without speaking. Aldrich left her to it. He made tea, put a second cup on the small table near the flap, and went back to his log. After a while she said, "How long was the field like that?" "Like quiet." "Like ended." He thought about it. "The orders came down 9 days ago. The signing was 8 days ago. You've been here 7. She nodded slowly. Something in her face shifted, not grief exactly, but the specific weight of a person who has been waiting a very long time for a particular thing to be over and has not yet fully arrived at the relief of it. He watched her carry that for a moment, and he did not say anything helpful or consoling, because there was nothing to say that would fit inside it. She picked up the second cup of tea without being told it was hers. "You knew," she said. "I made 2 cups." A long pause. The morning light came in pale and gray gold across the tent floor. "Hal," she said. He looked up from the log. She did not say anything else. Just his name, like a door opened a crack, like a test of a different kind, whether the word would fit in her mouth, whether he would make something unnecessary of it. He did not. He went back to his writing. She drank her tea. On the 9th day they came for her. He was restocking his kit when he heard the horses outside, not the scattered, tired movement of the Frontier Corps still breaking down its camp, but something more deliberate, more organized. He stepped to the tent flap and looked out. There were 7 of them. Orc men and women, all adults, all wearing the sigil of the Northern Range clans on their riding leathers, a braided iron ring over a mountain peak, the kind of mark Aldrich had seen on treaty documents but never on living people this close. They were not armed for conflict. They were armed for an escort. At their front was an older woman, white-haired, small, with a composure so absolute it made the air around her feel formal. She looked at the tent and said, in accented but precise frontier common, "We are looking for the peace speaker. We were told she was found here." Aldrich stood in the tent flap for a moment. The peace speaker. He had heard the term. Everyone had heard the term. For 3 months before the signing, the negotiations had turned on a single figure, an orc voice that both sides of the border war had agreed to hear, a woman who had spent 2 years moving between the clan councils and the frontier command, assembling the language of a treaty that 20 years of fighting had made feel impossible. No one on the Eastern Corps side had met her in person. She had negotiated through written texts and intermediaries, the documents passed through 3 sets of hands before they reached the generals. She was a name in dispatches, a signature at the bottom of the piece. Aldrich turned back into the tent. Veth was already on her feet. She had heard the horses. She had heard the older woman's voice. She was standing straight, her chin level, her expression the same composed watchfulness it had been on the first morning, but underneath it, something warmer, something that looked like coming home. "That's your escort," Aldrich said. "Yes." He looked at her for a moment. The wound he had closed in the ditch. The 2 cups of tea on the 9th morning. The single syllable of his name, tried out in the gray gold light. "You wrote the piece," he said. "I helped write it." She picked up her repaired riding coat from the camp chair. He had stitched the split seam on the 6th day, after she was well enough that he had time for something other than the wound. 22 months. 41 drafts. More arguments than I can count. A pause. The last draft was written in a field ditch 2 ridges east of here, while I was waiting for a courier who never came. I had no paper. I used the dirt. She said it simply, without drama. Love written in battlefield dust, a treaty, a hope, a thing hammered out of exhaustion and the absolute refusal to let another year of the war happen. He understood all at once what she had been carrying in her face on the 7th morning, standing at the tent flap, looking at the quiet field. Not just the relief of the ending. The knowledge that the ending had cost the last of something, and she had paid it gladly, and now she was not entirely sure what she was without the weight of it. He picked up his field bag and took out the small envelope he kept for finished patients, the one with the wound care instructions and the dosing for the herbs he sent them home with. He wrote her name on the outside. Veth. Then he thought for a moment and added the second word she had offered him, and folded the envelope and held it out. She took it. Looked at the front. The ghost of a smile crossed her face, not warm exactly, but real, the kind of smile a person gives when they have been seen by someone who was not trying to see them and it happened anyway. They will want to thank you, she said. The escort. They don't need to. They will anyway. She tucked the envelope into her coat. Let them. He walked out with her into the morning. The older woman at the front of the escort dismounted and came forward and bowed, a formal clan bow, deep and sustained, and said something in the Northern Range language that Aldrich did not speak, though its meaning was plain enough from the shape of it. Several of the escort followed her lead. One of the younger riders had to stop himself from outright weeping. Aldrich stood in the camp mud in his field surgeon's coat and accepted all of it with the same patient stillness he brought to everything, because there was no other sensible response to a clan's gratitude that he had not in any way sought and could not in any way refuse. Veth mounted without help, the wound pulling, he could see it in the set of her jaw, but she was not going to ask for a hand up in front of her escort and he was not going to offer one. When she was settled she looked down at him from the horse. The wound will itch in 4 days, he said. Don't pick at it. I never pick at wounds. Every patient says that. She almost laughed. It did not quite get there, but it was close, a warmth around the eyes that was better than a laugh would have been, more honest. She looked at him for one more moment, the way a person looks at a place they are committing to memory, and then she turned the horse. The escort moved out in a quiet, organized column. The older woman was last. She paused beside him and said, in frontier common, she does not thank people easily. But she will remember you. She kept the wound clean, Aldrich said. That's all I asked. The woman smiled, a smile with a great deal of history in it, and followed her peace speaker north along the field road. Aldrich stood in the camp mud a while longer. The grasses on the slope were still standing up again, indifferent, the way they always did. The morning light was coming in clear now, the gray burned off, the gold settling in along the eastern ridge. He went back into the tent, sat down at his small table, and poured the last of the tea. There were 2 cups on the table. He had made 2 again, from habit. The second sat untouched and still warm, sending a thin curl of steam into the clean morning air. He did not move it. He picked up his field log, turned to the page where the record for these 9 days lived, the wound, the dressing changes, the daily notes, the meals, the slow daily calibration of a person returning to herself, and at the bottom of the last entry he wrote 2 words that were not medical at all. He wrote them the way she had said his name on the 9th morning, plainly, without ceremony, as a thing that had happened and was true. Then he closed the log, drank his tea, and began breaking down the tent.